It's on camera. It's 1:03, so I'm gonna go ahead and start. We have, looks like a majority of the people. We're missing a few. So today is a little bit of a change up. And again, we have some of the outdoor trip crew here. So welcome everyone. I was a little distracted giving Matt boogers, so I didn't get to give everyone a welcome when you came in. It's Matt's birthday. Happy birthday, Matt. We're gonna talk today about a little bit about rescue prevention as well as about gear, and that's for the climbing. I had originally planned for belaying, but I'm going to release that video a little bit later, and we're going to release a how-to belay video with the help of some of your mentors. But today, what you're going to learn, especially for you outdoor trip folks, is very useful. We're going to talk about what gear we use, why we use it, and how we know when to stop using it. And this, is very helpful for the challenge course, but also in your climbing trips and your whatever trips you may go on personally as well. We're also going to talk about rescue prevention. Last week, we sort of went over the rescue box and how to set it up. And there was a question about, well, rescues are kind of a crazy thing. Are we in charge of rescues? The answer is no, not yet. You'll need to do some training for that. But we are all in charge of rescue prevention. That is sort of the soft skills, the techniques that go into preventing a rescue situation from even happening in the first place. Peak Adventures and all of us, part of Peak Adventures, are very proud of our track record or lack thereof of rescue scenarios. So, and what that has to do with is our rescue prevention. And so today's format is going to be more of a discussion. I'm going to hope for some feedback and some advice and some questions. I don't want to just monologue for an hour. That's not how I operate best. I like being interrupted. I like interacting. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. And before I forget, I want to, Val, do you still want to give a quick, I can't see your face. Oh yeah. Do you want to give a quick announcement?
Yes, I sent an email, but for those of you who didn't see it, if you, for whatever reason, feel that you will not be working for us after June 30th, again, there's no guarantee that we're going to have any work anytime soon after June 30th, but if you think that you're moving out of town or, whatever the situation may be, you're planning on getting another job that would conflict, I do need to turn in your names tomorrow. And then start processing through Dayforce your separation from employment. So if there's anybody here who falls into that category, please you can send me a little chat or an email, but I'll need to know that like ASAP. So just go ahead and do a little something in the chat box and we can figure it out from there. That's about it. Thank you, John.
Yeah, of course. So first, the gear talk. So behind me is this lovely gear board that usually lives on the course. When you're on the course, you'll be able to touch and feel and look at really up close and personal at all of these items. It's going to be a little hard for me to sort of zoom you into each and every one so you can really feel what it's like and see what the damage is. So this board represents sort of everything, all the gear that we use, and it's all retired gear, and it's retired for a reason. So some carabiners are stuck with an open gate, or some ATCs over here are worn down. We've decided that's no longer up to par with our standards. So what I'm going to do instead is screen share my screen here. And I took a picture earlier, so hopefully it's fairly clear. This is the left side of our board. These are some of our carabiners that we use. Our carabiners, there's two sort of types of carabiners. There's steel and there's aluminum. What we typically use is steel, and that because it lasts a little bit longer. The downside of steel is that it's heavier, but we don't really mind because we're not climbing up 3,000 feet and doing these crazy things that all these, edge of the sport climbers are doing. So steel works well for us. We always, when we're working with metals, we want metals to be with like metals. That means all the cables that we have on the course are also steel. Most of the hardware we have is steel. We want steel to be in contact with steel, not aluminum and steel. And that's because aluminum is a little bit of a softer metal, and the steel can wear down the aluminum really fast if we were to do aluminum on steel. So we do steel on steel always. And so up here are a couple different examples of carabiners that have been worn down and retired in the past. Up here are fairly obvious. And let me pull up, just so we're all on the same page here. Anatomy of a carabiner. So carabiners are the biggest and most helpful piece of equipment in climbing. They hold two things together, like our harnesses and our ropes, and they hold a lot of our equipment pieces together. So anatomy here, you have the gate. That's the part that opens up. It allows you to put a rope in there or an ATC in there. You have, there's a lot of stuff on here you really don't need to know: rivet pin, nose, all that good stuff. What you really need to know is the gate. And then you also want to know about the spine, this long part right here. So whenever we put force on a carabiner, we want it along this spine. So the rope would be up here. Can you all see my cursor on the screen? Okay. So you'd want all the force to be pulling along this spine. Okay. The other option you could have is all the force going this way, and that pulls against the gate, which is not ideal. Now, carabiners are over-engineered, and they can withstand forces in both directions, and forces are measured in kilonewtons, which are a lot of newtons. They essentially, I forget what and engineers would know better, but they hold 1 kilonewton is a whole ton of force. And these, for example, this long axis right here, some of our steel hold up to, I think, 50 kilonewtons, which is kind of crazy. And this way can hold, typically it's a lot less, and that's typically around 10 kilonewtons, which is still a lot, but not ideal. So when we weight it, we just want to make sure that we're going across or along this long axis. So anyways, just know that this is the gate right here, and this is the spine. That's going to be pretty important. See if I can go back to the picture here. So here you can see our gate, here you can see our spine. These ones retired, obviously, the gate's stuck open. For whatever reason, they were in use for a long time. The spring mechanism in there doesn't work, stuck open, retired. Don't want to use that. There's a couple other carabiners here that you can't quite tell why, but if you were able to touch them, you'd know that this carabiner right here is actually stuck closed. You can't twist this little thing. So that was retired. So anyways, this is all to highlight there's a lot of ways in which our carabiners can break. These little pins right here can snap. There's a lot of little like micro fractures, a lot of things that can happen. I just want you to know that part of your job and part of my job as well, and everyone's job, is to every day, while we also inspect the ropes when we set them up, we also inspect our hardware, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Now we buy these steel carabiners, we take good care of them, store them inside. It's not too damp, it's not receiving sun all the time, so they last a long time. Some of our carabiners are 10 plus years old, and they're still rock solid. So don't want to freak you out, but that's why we use steel. Aluminum would retire a lot quicker. Down here, moving a little further, are rapid links for outdoor climbing. So on your outdoor trips and for our course, these are super useful. They kind of look like carabiners, but they lock in a different way. So this little piece right here just spins down on this thread. In outdoor climbing, these are used a lot in anchors. When building your anchor, you'd have chains or something to thread to these, or there's a variety of uses here. On the ropes course, we use these to attach a lot of things to our cables, like our SRDs. I don't know if you remember from last week, but we have pulleys that our ropes go through, and those pulleys are held up with these. So super strong again, very well rated, very high rated. There's a couple other, there's another carabiner down here and a couple other styles of these rapid links. This is called the Delta link. It's only really found in 1 or 2 spots on the course. We won't go into that one. This is a rapid link that snapped for whatever reason. It may have been cut or fractured in a way. I don't know. These things are really, really hard to snap. So just keep that in mind. And then there's another carabiner down here.
Can I add something about the rapid links?
Yeah, please.
They're only super duper strong when they're closed.
Yeah, thank you. So these don't work well when they're open. There is a lot of smart people who could tell you exactly why, but the reason being essentially is when these have weight on them, the forces that are applied transfer through this material to other material. Now, if this gate's open, that transfer of energy, that transfer of all that force applied is lessened. So under a lot of pressure, the way that these fail is most commonly, and by most commonly, I mean by YouTube video people who purposely break them so that, for purposes of education. The most common way they break is if they're open and a ton of force is applied this way, and this thing just sort of bends open slowly. And that's under like massive amounts of pressure, so tons of mechanical advantage.
I can't remember our current setup for the Wild Woozy because it's changed recently. But for those of you who are familiar with the Wild Woozy, it is 2 cables in a V from one tree going out to other points, and it's about a foot and a half off the ground, and people walk across that cable. They're not jumping, they're just walking across the cable. And there was a setup, somebody years and years and years ago set it up and didn't tighten them down, and the force of tightening those cables and having 10 participants walk across them really bent those guys out of shape. So I don't know. I wasn't there that day. I don't know at what point they started bending. I don't think the staff even realized what had happened. I think it was just error. They didn't get tightened down all the way. I don't know with our current setup if it would still be as dramatic, but it's still a lot of weight having multiple people up to 200 or plus pounds walking on that, but it greatly reduces the strength when they're not tightened down all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Val.
John, I see you have a couple different gates here, or at least three that I'm saying.
Yeah.
You want to explain?
I can go over those. And let me skip over. Yeah, okay. So the carabiners, again, the hardware that we are all going to be in contact with most often are these carabiners. Now there are a ton of different styles. Not only are there aluminum and steel, there's a ton of very specific styles for climbing. There's also different ways that these gates right here can lock. Now, the one you're probably most familiar with is this one. It's called a screw gate. So essentially, let's see if I'm going to turn you back to me. So screw gate, so mine looks a little bit different, but I don't want to pull all the things off the hardware board and then I forget where they go. So I'm just going to use, this is a personal I have, but it's the same thing. It's called a screw gate. Why it's called that is because it screws. Pretty simple. Now, that's one type. Another type of carabiner is just a single stage, and it's just a push open. You just push it open just like that. So one stage, and this would be 2 stage. There's a 3rd stage. So that's how these are sort of measured out or categorized. So 1 stage, it requires 1 action to open that thing. 2 stage, it requires 2 actions to open the gate. So screw and then push. There's also another 2 stage that we have on the course, just a little bit different. And this one is not a screw, but a twist. I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell, but it twists and then you can pull it open just like that. And then when you let go, it comes back into lock position. That's called an auto locker because all you have to do is let go, it's locked. Versus this is not locked. And this is not locked until you screw it. There's also a 3rd or a 3-stage carabiner. These are used much less They're a little clunkier to use efficiently. Yet you can imagine if you're on the wall, you blade 20 people a day, you have 2 carabiners. Using a 3-stage for every single one of those climbers would be really excessive. But I don't have one here. They're all at the course. We only have a couple. But a 3-stage is essentially, it's kind of like this auto locker, except first you'd have to push the gate upwards and then twist and then push in. And it also called an auto locker. So you don't see those as often. It's the 3rd stage, of course, is an extra sort of security level for you or for any climber. But they're a little clunky to use, which is why you don't see them everywhere. Now, the gates styles don't necessarily mean that one is stronger than the other. However, the general rule of thumb is these bigger sort of double locking 2-stage, 3-stage can generally be found with bigger kilonewton ratings going this way. So those are the types of carabiners. Miguel, for your staff, is there anything else that you'd like to go over and that could be useful for the Challenge Center staff?
No, just know that the different style of gates, whether they're locking or non, plays a big factor in how you're going to use them. So understanding when to use a locking and when you can use a non-locking is pretty critical. So just know that the gate is really important, as well as understanding what that carabiner is used for. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and so of course, let me share my screen again. Go back to those pictures we had. So all of these you see here are those screw locking, those 2 2-stage carabiners. Down here at the very bottom, you see that auto locker. We don't use those single stage on the course for really anything. There might be an application here or there that we use it for, but don't need to be familiar with that. So those are the carabiners, and you'll just get used to how they feel, how they work, and then these ones are the ones that we use every day. I'm going to scroll over here to the next segment of our hardware board. Let me try and flip that. That's annoying. Okay. Take care of your neck. So we have the carabiners. The carabiners connect to the rope, to the harness, as well as to our ATCs. Does anyone know or remember, if I said it, what an ATC stands for? Does anyone have a guess? In the chat or just speak up.
I may be wrong, but some old guy told me the other day it stands for air traffic controller. He could have been messing with me.
That old guy is right. Thank goodness for old people. They know a lot of stuff. Yeah, air traffic controller sounds really fancy, but that's what the ATC is for. This is essentially a braking mechanism for anything or any climber that's up in the air. Therefore, air traffic controller. There's a couple different styles on here. This is an ATC, but it's called a different name. This is a more old school one. This is a more old school one. We're getting into up here. This is what we use on the course and what you'll see mostly out there in the climbing world. So I'll start up here. These are both, I believe, both black diamond style. But the anatomy of an oh, I didn't pull it up, I should have. But you have this sort of, it's called a keeper strap. This is what ties into the harness in your carabiner. This is what the rope goes into. And then down here, you see these little teeth that we kind of discussed the other day on the course. And that helps sort of break the rope. It gives you a little bit of extra friction on the rope so that you can break if need be. And that maybe that does or does not make sense to you right now. I know we haven't gone over the actual belaying that we do, and that's coming shortly, I promise, but it will make more sense. So this is the keeper strap. This is the ATC body, and these are sort of the teeth that the rope go over. Now you can see the ones down here don't have those teeth. It doesn't make them any less or more efficient. It's really all about, it's like steel versus aluminum, right? Some folks prefer to have these teeth because it makes it easier to break bigger folks. Some people prefer these because if you have a bunch of 50-pound 8th graders or whatever, second graders, it's easier to lower, right? If you want to lower someone, you don't want a lot of friction. So we have these kinds. We just don't use these that often. And these ones are just a little older. You'll no longer see them. We used to have them for our outdoor trips. We didn't use them too much on the course. I'm sure we did before my time. And then we have this one as well. And they're all just older forms of these. These are sort of more well adapted. Down here is what is called a Petzl Grigri. So this is used not very often. It's used by team leads to go set rock holds or clean up the rock wall. And that allows them to do it by themselves. They don't need someone belaying them. But this is also a belay device. So if I wanted to belay someone in a similar fashion as I would with one of these, do that with this. The difference is this is called an auto blocking or auto locking carabiner. So, for example, and these are a little confusing to use even to climbers who use them every day. So I don't want to go too into that. But essentially, if these are nice, if someone was climbing up and the belayer gets stung by a bee or something, and maybe the belayer forgot to tie the stopper knot, this grigri will also auto lock. It'll break if the belayer was to let go of the brake hand. And there's a mechanism in here that helps you do that. And so these are awesome. And this little lever right here is what you'd use to lower. So they're really awesome, but they're like $100. They're super expensive. They're really clunky, and they're not super friendly for getting climbers up and down a wall. If you're doing it, all day, you're going to get tired of using these. We use them for a couple different things. For our swing, it's really nice. And then again, for the team leads for maintenance days. And then that's all we really need to know about these right now. Up here is what I keep referring to as a pulley, but this is really called a shear reduction device, or SRD for short. Essentially, it's like, as you can see, it's a half pulley right here. This is what the rope goes up and through and then comes back down. And that's what's at the top of the tower and all of our elements. So these things are awesome. They just add friction in the rope. They take care of the rope because of the material that this little black piece right here is made out of. It really is super smooth. So if, once they get really old, the rope will run it down, and we'll go through that in a little bit. And it can get a little fractured, and little sharp pieces can stick out, and that can cut the rope. So this is a part of what we check on our inspections. But that is what the SRD actually looks like up at the top of the tower. And that's a shear reduction device. Down here, we have our ropes in different stages of their life. Last week, we mentioned the rope log. So we log however many climbs are on a rope. So when I or whoever first cuts a rope and puts it up, and the first climber to ever climb on it goes on it, that's what this looks like. That's what that rope will look like. It's excellent. Brand new, out of the factory. The end is burnt, so the little fibers inside aren't poking out. There's very little dirt. There's very little tufting. There's no soft spots. There's no, all that sort of stuff that you got quizzed on last week. There's none of that. Here is our one of the rescue ropes, and this one has just been down. We use a system. Excellent, very good, watch. So this is excellent, straight from the factory, just put up. The next one down, typically around 200, 300, 400 climbs on a rope, it'll get downgraded to very good. Still excellent to use, but just noted that it's not brand new. It's a little more dirty. Obviously, this one's a different color, but you can see that it's got a little dirt on it. Still not a ton of tufting or a bunch of fuzziness. If you were able to look really closely, you might see a little bit, but really the only difference between excellent and very good is that tufting and a little bit of dirt. Again, the end right here is still burnt. The fibers inside are not coming out in any way, so this one's great to use for another at least 500 climbs. The next stage down is good. Good is, believe it or not, this rope and this rope started out looking like this rope. So they start out the same color, the same shape, size, everything's the same, except this one's got 1,000+ climbs on it. And you can see of course, you can see that it's very dark. It's been running up and through an SRD for 1,000+ climbs. It's taken away some of this material that's on the SRD and carried it onto the sheathing itself. This rope has been on the bark and dragged around a ton from setting it up and belaying. You'll probably see some excess, like over here, you see that fraying or that tufting. You'll see way more of that. And this is where we really, of course, we're always careful, but once it starts getting to this stage, we really want to keep an eye on it. This is where soft spots can form, and then they can slip by us if we're not paying attention. This one, I can tell you up here, has probably been burnt at the ends at least once in its lifetime. That means these ends were reburnt because it started coming out. The core started poking out. And then you have watch. When something gets downgraded to watch, that means it's up to the team lead, myself, Val, it's up to all of us to make sure we all know that this one is on the verge. If a rope gets to this point, I will replace it. I'll have the team leads help me replace it, and we'll go back to excellent. So it can get to watch typically around 1,500 climbs. Sometimes ropes get to this stage a lot faster than 1,500 climbs. And that's because at any point in the stage, if the ATC was worn down or the SRD was worn down, or this was just sort of really used a ton in the heat of the summer, and like 700 climbs, it looks like this, we'll still want to put it on watch. It's not about the amount of climbs, it's about the rope itself. I briefly mentioned that ropes in the challenge course industry and in climbing for the outdoor trip folks, ropes can get worn down in a series of ways, and there's a lot of things that they come into contact with that is not necessarily good for them, depending on where you are. On the challenge course, we have a lot of bark and dirt that can get caught up in the sheathing and wear away slowly. Like I said, the SRDs can wear it down, TCs can wear it down. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. So if it looks like this, definitely watch, definitely going to get replaced soon. I'm going to go down. I teased you with this one. So this one right here is what was on watch. That's where we just left off. This one, I forget let me see what's behind me. It's essentially just really, 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 really dirty. And you can see this sort of line right here. It might be hard for you to see especially if you're on a phone. There's a line right here that indicates that something along the lines was scratching it. So right here, it's really rough, but on the rest of the rope, it's not too rough. That means that there's a potential problem with the ATC used or the SRD used. Either way, the rope is damaged and we need to replace. And then we also need to look at the ATCs and the SRDs to make sure that those aren't going to damage the new rope that we put up. Over here is another example. This is the rope that we use on the dive in the dive only, and I'll get to that in a second. But you can see here what happens. The sheathing starts fraying, and the core, this white stuff, the core starts coming out and undoing itself. And that's what happens if we don't burn the edges. You can see on this orange one, the edge right here, or the end is not burnt. And this, in a matter of maybe 100 climbs, or depending on what we're using it for, can turn into this. Not good. That's because this little sheathing, that inside part, is the integrity. It's the heart of the rope. If it's just sort of coming out or spewing out this way, you can imagine you can just keep pulling this white piece, and then all you're left with is this sheathing, this orange part. And that's not, like I said, it's not the integrity of the rope. And so we want to make sure that that sheathing is very well protected. You can imagine the sheathing being sort of your body, and the core being your body, and the sheathing being the clothing and the sunscreen and the rain protective layer for your rope. So we want to make sure that this little white piece is being undamaged. Now, I mentioned that this rope that we use on the dive is a little different than all the rest of these ropes. And that's not just because it looks different, it's also because of the way that it's designed. Now, all of these ropes are what we call static ropes. What that means is if someone were to fall and extend this rope downwards, it's not going to stretch out much. It's not a slinky. it won't extend as much as a dynamic rope might slinky. There's a couple different reasons why you'd want either rope. We teach on the course to have a sort of a tight belay so that if someone were to fall, this doesn't need to extend too much because they're not falling great distances. You can imagine if you fell 20 feet and your rope wasn't slinky enough, that once you hit the end of the rope, it's going to jolt you really hard. And if you fall 20, 30 feet, that jolt is enough to, in some cases, I don't want to scare you, but in some cases it can break bones. It can make people flip upside down. And so we don't want that. So we teach tight belay, and therefore that's how we justify using these static ropes. Now on the dive, it's inherent in the nature of the dive for people to take big falls. They jump off that platform and they come down 10 feet and then the rope catches them. So we don't want a static rope catching them. We want the rope to stretch a little bit to cushion the fall, kind of like airbags in your car. It might hurt a little bit, but it cushions you and it keeps you from hitting the harder surface, the steering wheel or the ground, or whatever that may be. So this extends a little bit when force is given to sort of soothe that transition to a full stop. And that's a dynamic. The rest are static. Don't look at that. And so those are our ropes. And that is sort of the majority of the hardware board. Now I could talk for another 30, 45 an hour about how to check all these. We know how to check the rope, or at least we've done an overview. There's a couple, there's tons we need to check when we go to our hardware. Now, the general rule of thumb, and I'm going to switch you back to my face here. The general rule of thumb is I have my ATC. This one's just a personal one, not the ones we use at the course. But you can see down in here where the blue has turned to white, and that's from friction given by the rope. So it wears down on the metal over time. Now the wear and tear is normal. It just happens. However, there's a point in time where the wear and tear becomes too much and we need to retire. And the rule of thumb is 1 millimeter of wear. And you're probably thinking, I don't have any idea how thick 1 millimeter is. Think about looking at your nail. The width of your nail is 1 millimeter. And that's really tiny. But what we're talking about here is metal wearing down to that point. It takes a while for metal to get to that point. And so once it reaches that point, we want to retire the carabiner or the rapid link or the ATC. The major concern there is not the rope just wearing all the way through and then there's no metal left. The concern is that wear and tear creating sharp edges, which are going to cut the rope. So we want to make sure that we're checking those ATCs and those carabiners.
Hi, good morning. This is
For outdoor trip folks, you'll be using a lot those ATCs a lot. Definitely not in the volume that you're using. What we use them on the course, but you have to check them every time because the way they're handled when they're stored, where they're stored, a lot of factors can come into play when you're taking care of your hardware. It's always, no matter what, every time you check every piece of your equipment. Carabiners can wear down in a similar fashion. This one isn't wearing down too much. This was on the hardware board. You can see while it was retired, this little piece came out. Sharp edges, big no-no for anything that's anywhere near a rope. Again, that represents a cutting hazard. So sharp edges, retire. Carabiners wear down for you climb or outdoor trip folks. The wear down right here where the rope runs through it. In rapid links in outdoor anchors and in carabiners and outdoor anchors or chain links, this will become worn down. I don't know if I have a good example up here. I do, but it's hard to show on here. But that will start to take the form of the rope itself, and you can see there's a ton of wear eventually. Again, 1 millimeter. If it wears down to that point, need to retire. What happens with carabiners is you can see the width right here. It's about my pinky. So if this starts wearing down too thin, the rope has a bend right here when it comes through it. If the rope bends too harshly, way too harshly, that's going to damage the core of the rope. So that's the concern with carabiners. And that's not too much of a concern on the Challenge Center because our ropes don't go through carabiners. I go through the SRDs and the ATCs and things of that nature, but just something else to look out for. And I think that's all I want to talk about really with hardware. Again, I could talk about it forever, but I do want to get into rescue prevention. Are there any additions or any questions before I move on? Miguel, would you like to add anything for your folks?
Nope. Just know that like rope inspection, we have a rope block for our ropes as well. Inspections should happen every time that we use those ropes. I showed for those of you on the climbing training a couple of weeks ago, I kind of just showed you where that is. But in terms of climbing, it's a little bit different, but the basics here translate to when you're also outdoors climbing.
Great.
And I just want to add, if all these details and like millimeters and measurements, like if that seems like a lot of info, it does get tremendously easier when it's in your hands every day, right? Every shift you're inspecting ropes multiple times, you're setting up gear, so you're constantly seeing it. So a millimeter groove in any other setting is going to be hard to notice, but you'll notice it right away, right? Eventually, once the experience comes.
Yeah, thank you, John. So just the basics there. Again, you're seeing right now, especially behind me, you're seeing all the bad examples. When you get to the course, there will be nothing but good examples on the course. And so it will become very evident which one's good and which one's bad, quote unquote. Moving on to rescue prevention. I alluded earlier that rescue prevention is not the act of the rescue itself. Rescue prevention is actually more important, in my opinion. And the reason I think that, and I think some folks would agree, is that when the point at which you're to a rescue, it's too late. It should not have gotten there. The experience of the individual has changed drastically. And not only the individual, but the participants who are also there experiencing the event. Now, this can look different outdoors, and this can look different at the challenge, which is also outdoors. But what I mean is outdoor trip folks, when you're at Consumnes River Gorge or wherever you are. I have a couple different stories, on the Challenge Center. I've had folks climb ups on when I was just starting out. I had a younger gal, high school. She climbed up the carbon net. I knew she was scared. Not super rare for people to be scared when they're climbing. But this particular gal climbed up, became unresponsive, wasn't communicating, went limp, and had to lower her down. It could have been prevented by doing a couple things that I now know. And same for, I was doing an outdoor trip rock climbing with the Girl Scouts one time. And this, again, younger gal, very, very scared, but willing to get herself out there and do it. Climbed up, got her foot stuck in a crack, had to go up and sort of unstick her foot while she was falling, and everyone came around, and it was sort of this big event that it's not conducive to really a great learning experience. It's the only thing that's focused on. So what we want to do is prevent those kind of scenarios from happening. Now, this is something that we all do naturally, this rescue prevention. When people come in the door, we chat. Not only are we making ourselves feel comfortable with the participants, we're making the participants feel comfortable with us. And that does a lot of things. First, it helps you with your public speaking. It helps you become more involved with the group that you're with and the group as a whole. It also allows those participants who are coming, you get a wide range of attitudes that walk into the gate the very first time they enter the course. John's nodding his head like, oh yeah. So you get people who are like, heck yeah, super stoked. When do we climb? I'm down for it. Or I'm too scared to climb, but yes, let's do all the team building. Or I don't know why I'm here. I don't have to be here. This sucks. So anything in between is what you can have. You can have folks that are expert rock climbers. You can have folks who have never seen a rock wall before. And so what our job is to sort of bridge that gap. Rescue prevention not only applies to the games that we lead. Hey, if you're running on grass, it's a little wet, maybe walk toe to toe. drink water, use the restroom, take care of yourself, challenge by choice. There's a lot of things we do, and there's a lot that we can really go into depth about. However, really the way that our programs are built and the way that outdoor trips can be built is in that hour-long car ride where you're driving to the crag with your people, or the 4 hours before we actually start climbing on the challenge center. We're building rapport with our participants. We're getting them comfortable, again, getting them comfortable with us. One of the things that I like to tell folks, or and maybe this is relevant to you or not, but I've been in this arena for a bigger part of my life, 5, 6, 7 years, and so relating to people that say, hey, listen, this is going to be scary. It's scary for me, and I do this every day. So relating to people is a big part of that. And there's a lot of strategies that go into making them feel comfortable. And it starts when they walk in the gate. So what we try to do on the course, and what you can do as outdoor trips, is as soon as you meet them, you greet them. You say, hey, you start the small talk. You begin the talk, the dialogue. Make them feel like it's okay to approach you. You're going to get a lot of kids. We do a lot of kids. That's elementary, middle, and high school. And they're going to generally be, generally, I'm definitely not always the case, but very scared to approach, and less willing to speak up when they are scared. And so we want to open them up, and we do that with all the games. It's inherent in the programming that the team needs build for the day, and it's inherent in the way that we interact. But by the time we come back from after lunch or the first couple hours and it's time to climb, we want to have established that well in advance, or well before we get people in the air. And that's because when someone comes up to me and they want to say, I want to climb this element, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to clip you in. I'm going to go through the toe-to-toe, which is something you learn about, but I'm going to go through the toe-to-toe, which is a process that takes a minute or two with every participant. And in that toe-to-toe, I'm focused on making sure they're clipped in, the knot's tied appropriately, there's no this, that, and the other, the shoes are tied, the harness is on, blah, blah, blah. And I'm also gauging the participants' emotions or state of mind. If I've been with them for 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever, an hour in the car, and I know they've been joking, talkative, ha ha ha, really super relaxed and laid back, and then they get up to me, they're about to climb 40 feet, and they're like pale white, and they're not talking, and they're not joking, I know that there's a sign there that maybe I need to stick on the ground with this person for a little bit longer and just have a chat. How are you feeling? What's your goal? Where do you want to get to? Reinforce that challenge by choice. Reinforce the fact that, I just went through that toe-to-toe. Everything, the equipment is fine. And that is rescue prevention in a nutshell. Now, there's a lot more that goes into it. And like I said at the beginning, you will do it. I guarantee you, everyone has their own sort of style, but you will do it naturally. But what this talk, really, the goal of this talk is to sort of bring those techniques up to the surface so that you're doing it. And so every facilitator, I know John Kay has different ways of relating to people. Making small talk in and of itself is very personal. There's certain things that I know nothing about that maybe John Kay can talk for an hour about. And that's just how he's going to relate to people. Not everyone's going to like me as a person. It's not personal. It just is what it is. Or not going to like sort of my style of play. But maybe they really appreciate how John Kay approaches things, and they're going to really relate to John Kay. And so that's sort of how we conquer and divide this rescue and prevention, especially on the course. When you're in outdoor trips, hopefully you have a co-lead or an intern, for lack of a better term, that's going to also be there with you. And you can also use other participants. I can't tell you the amount of times I've led a climbing trip where there's been someone who knows how to climb. They just wanted a free ride up to the crag. And so you can use your resources too. But that's a little more of an advanced technique. So I don't want you to really focus too much on that. Just know that rescue prevention is not the rescue itself. It is that small talk and all that stuff in between that happens before we climb. Some of the big things we do, just to make sure I mention them, is the 3 rules. Take care of yourself, each other in this place. That goes a long, long way. Reinforcing those 3 rules is going to, by the time you get to climbing, they're going to say, oh yeah, I can just not do it. I'm not being forced to do anything. If I want to go grab water, it's okay. I know that because they've told us to do that 20 times. Take care of each other. That's when we're on the course, it looks a little different. We always remind folks when we get into climbing, hey, remember, take care of each other. Be supportive. Don't push people to do things that they don't want to do. And then take care of this place, which is, at the beginning, it seems like, hey, yeah, don't litter, don't play with the carabiners. But if we strictly enforce that, take care of this place, by the time we get to climbing, again, the participants know that the peak staff takes care of their equipment really well. And so,
can I add something to that, John?
What's that?
Can I add something?
Oh yeah.
Just from my experiences, every step, like John's saying, every step in the process of how we rerun the day it's all rescue prevention. So those 3 rules, all that stuff comes into play, and making sure that we take those things seriously. Take care of yourself, water and all that stuff, take care of each other and take care of this place. Maintaining those and taking those rules seriously is key, because a lot of times, or I have seen in the past, where maybe some of our staff are having a rough day and maybe we let, take care of each other kind of go, and you start to see some disrespect between the participants, depending on the group. And that can turn out badly for climbing later on, because a whole part of keeping someone calm when they're in a stressful situation is, especially if it's their first time, helping everyone else quiet down, helping maintain that respectful environment is super key. And it's just one of the pieces, right? All those pieces are super important. So I just say, like, make sure that when we're doing the introduction, like harnessing up and all that stuff, rely on your other staff members to uphold those rules, because that's going to keep it good. Sorry, this is one of my favorite topics that I had to jump in there.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. So,
John, can you hear me real quick? This is Wendy.
Yeah. What's up?
So the other part that is valuable, because I think what you're saying is so important, is that we also encourage even the people that say, I'm not going to climb, or I'm just here as a chaperone, to participate in hearing our talk. So in the morning, if we have teachers and chaperones or whatever, we have a private little meeting with them at the same time the kids are learning their information, just to kind of touch bases with what their expectation is and what we expect from them. And then again, we do for the climbing time, so everyone is on the same page, whether they're choosing to climb or not. It's so that we all can support each other in what the activities look like in our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, so we have as Wendy alluded to, there's a couple other things that you may or may not have heard from us yet. So we have the 3 rules. We have our philosophy, which is challenge by choice. That one's pretty evident how that relates. Everyone has their own personal challenge. For some people, it's just being at the course and being engaged and talking to people for 8 hours in one day. That's a challenge for a lot of people, let alone having to climb in front of them. Some people are going to want to climb 40 feet 50 times or whatever, and that's their challenge. Awesome. We're here for that. So challenge by choice, reinforcing that a couple times throughout the day, through the games and through the climbing. We also have, before we climb, a safety talk. So we go through the comfort zones. That's the comfort. You have the comfort zone, you have the challenge zone, you have the panic zone. Optimally, you're at the challenge zone, and you'll hear that speech a ton when we get back onto the course. But we have a safety talk before we climb to reinforce all those. And then what Wendy's alluding to, when we have programs with parent chaperones, sometimes we'll have 20 kids and each kid has a parent there. So we have it's almost like a whole nother group of parents but they're kind of just sitting to the side and watching everything happen. And I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was always very aware when my mom or dad was watching me. And so that plays a role. And so part of that is also, we have a parent talk. We pull the parents aside, say, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to need you to, in no uncertain terms, but very polite, I'm going to need you to not interfere with your kid's learning process. Do not encourage or engage in any sort of peer pressure, especially when it comes to climbing.
Good job. Great, bud.
What's that? Oh.
I think she was talking to her son.
Oh,
Hello.
gotcha. Yeah, so there's...
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had you.
Not muted.
There's a lot of things we do, including parent talk, safety talk, 3 rules, challenge by choice, and also what Kyle was saying is enforcing those rules and that challenge by choice, which is, admittedly, it is my area of growth, right? So being that person that's not willing to take a person aside and say, I'm going to need you.
I'm sorry. I thought I was muted.
Whatever's happening, or I need you to engage a little bit more, or having those difficult conversations one-on-one and doing that tactfully. What that does is sort of set the stage for the rest of the day. And so for that specific, for me, I really rely on and take notes from other folks who are really good at that. And so we're all going to have our areas of growth. There's going to be parts of this process that are more difficult than others. And so I encourage you, whether you're out there at CRG or the quarry with your group of 6 climbers, or you're at the Challenge Center, the most important piece is, Savannah said it in the chat, know people's names. The small talk matters. Get to know people. People are more willing to come up to you if they have already had a dialogue and there's already a channel of communication open. We get into a routine where we're constantly talking at groups of people, not to people individually. And that's sort of, there's a wall that's there when you're only doing that with the group. So it's sort of trying to break that little wall so that people feel that they can come up to you and say, hey, I need help here, or can you double check me because this doesn't seem quite right. So that's sort of the soft skills of a rescue prevention. Now, go ahead.
I would just love to add on to this because it's something that's crucial in prevention, and also John's demonstrating it right now as he's giving his talk. One of the biggest things that can either incite panic or de-escalate tension is tone, your tenor, your cadence, how quickly or slowly you're speaking. Do you sound more like a punitive force, or do you sound more like a supportive force? And you can use the exact same words. You can say the exact same sentence, but it will have a completely different effect. And you can notice it throughout your life. Whenever you hear someone else talking or hear yourself talking, if someone's talking near you, listen to how they're talking, watch how you feel in response to it, and that'll provoke more insights into that dynamic.
Yeah, and there's a really good TED Talk. I know some of you may have watched it, but it came out in the first week's assignment about this very topic. It's about eight minutes long. The way in which you talk can really influence how people view your presence or feel your presence, which is very crucial in rescue prevention. Now, this training, this rescue prevention, once we get back onto the course, we're going to have another more sort of in-depth, very Challenge Center specific sort of chat about it. I know that when we're on the course, and this may help Miguel and the Outdoor Trip folks too, just in case, say we've done everything right, and sometimes there just is a rescue that's necessary, the physical rescuing of a person. Sometimes it's just going to happen. It doesn't mean that the steps weren't taken. What we do on the course and what we focus on essentially is ground control or crowd control. So you can imagine we have 30 people and then one person needs to be rescued on the dive. We don't want all the 29 people to come crowd the person on the dive and be watching them. They aren't a show. What we like to use is each other first and foremost, everyone else crowd control except for those involved in the rescue. And then this is a part that's kind of funny, but just sort of crucial and can be forgotten sometimes, is we have Mountain Dew. So if there is a rescue that needs to happen, our sort of code on the course is Mountain Dew. So say Thomas or Carly are belaying someone on the catwalk, and a person gets to the middle, sits down, freezes, won't move, won't talk. You've determined that a rescue situation is necessary. Let's say Kyle's the team lead on the course that day. We'll say, hey, participant, can you go tell Kyle that I need a Mountain Dew? They go get Kyle. They say, hey, for whatever reason, Thomas needs a Mountain Dew. I don't know, kind of weird. But they'll tell the team lead, hey, this guy needs a Mountain Dew. And what that tells the team lead that there's a rescue that needs to happen. And the reason we do that, and it may be obvious, again, it's that crowd control. We don't want to shout across the course, hey, this person's freaking out, we need a rescue. We want to make sure that we're keeping everyone's emotions sort of as they were. And there's a lot that goes into that. So just a quick aside, I always want to make sure I mention that because it can get forgotten. And it's also a very crucial tool. And it alludes to, again, making sure that we're staying calm, even if someone else isn't, because that's what our job is. That's why we have this chat. Emotions play a big role during rescues. And again, we're going to go through another actual rescue training further down your progression as a candidate, a facilitator, and apprentice. But some things to think about, some things that you can do now are build rapport, enforce that philosophy and those rules, and be aware of the signs. And those signs can sometimes be, and I'm aware of your time here, I just want to say a couple quick things. Signs can be, physical. They can be this person's sweating, they're not talking, or it could be this person is way more vocal and nervous and fidgety now than they were all day. So signs can vary. When someone comes up to you and wants to climb something, it doesn't mean that him and his 3 friends weren't over there making fun of each other for not climbing it. Go do it, wuss. Right? So they can come up to you having that pressure, and it's a conversation we couldn't stop because none of us heard it. And so they can come up to you showing signs of being very nervous. They're not making eye contact, when they were being very polite before. And so just choosing a handful of folks and becoming their sort of resource on the course or at the crag, and allowing your coworkers to help you maybe choose a different handful of folks. So divide up the crowd there. So anyways, that's sort of the really, 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 really quick and dirty of hardware and rescue prevention. Do Val, Wendy, John, Kyle, any of the senior staff have anything to add?
I think you did a really great job. And then when we meet the octopi.
Uh-oh.
We'll chat about this a little bit. So if you have questions, did that go through?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sort of.
Yeah. When the octopi, there'll be a discussion. Go ahead, Kyle.
I have an announcement to make. It's very important. My team has chosen a team name, and it is Quarantine. Round of applause for Quarantine. What was I going to say? No, you killed it, John. That was great, man. I think it's one of those things that the more experience you get with just being with people out on the course, it's going to be really difficult at first, right? Like before you know everything there is to know about the course, you're going to have trouble feeling comfortable enough to help other people feel comfortable. So it's just one of those things where it just takes time. It just takes time and practice. So don't stress out about it. Once you guys get some experience on the course, it'll all sink in.
Cool. Miguel, is there anything you wanted to add or want me to add? I'm happy to stick around with you and your crew if you'd like as well.
Nope, I think that's good. But yeah, great job. And I agree with everyone here. The big thing is that you can practice these things, all these rapport builders, all these getting to know people in a normal daily fashion, remembering names. This is life stuff. This isn't course or outdoor trip stuff. You do this in life, you're going to do it on the course. And you can practice that now, even while you're away. And it will make your life more full and more fulfilled. So it's a great thing to learn these things and practice in the course, but this isn't a microscopic environment. This is life, and this is learning how to interact with people. So just taking what you learned today and applying it.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of applying, the part of
I love the shirt, Miguel.
assignment that I put out on Monday, that is sort of in response to this rescue prevention. I know there's a written prompt about stress. And so if you are struggling with that or need to chat or anything about that, please feel free to reach out to your mentors or I, and we can sort of help you through that. But I'm really excited to hear your responses. I'm sure each of us senior staff has our own little story. I know I have my couple of stories that I kind of alluded to, but there are these rescue situations do happen. Hopefully not they don't happen that often, but they can if we don't take this seriously. So I'm going to leave you with that. I'm going to stop recording. So if I get murdered, there's no